Alright, so this is Deathblade. Deathblade is one of the 3 assassin classes. I'm currently playing the remaining energy blade. Very fluid playstyle, one of the most fun builds in the game, in my opinion. Her identity involves building up gauge to get these 3 balls filled up. And when you do pop your gauge, you get a buff. You get this lingering buff, or this remaining buff, that gives you attack speed, movement speed, and attack power. The general playstyle of this build in particular, you build up orbs, you pop your identity. Something to note, when you pop this Z skill, you get that same buff, but it's actually weaker than if you have remaining energy to level 3. Quite interesting. Her synergy is a 12% head attack, back attack buff. Anyone who uses skills, any enemy debuffed with this debuff, 12% head attack, back attack buff, gets a 12% damage increase. Now, if they don't have a head attack or back attack skill, it's a 3% damage increase. So it caters for people without head attacks or back attacks. Now, the other thing to note about this chick, Deathblade, she's got this buff here. Very nice buff, very high uptime, because you just saw what we're doing there. You get a nice big attack speed, movement speed buff. And it's really nice for classes with high animation lock or low movement speeds. Also, check out all my skills here. Notice how they're all on cooldown. When I pop my Z skill, notice how all the skills just went off of cooldown by like a crap ton. And that scales with how much spec you have. So I think in this case, with my amount of spec, almost 1400, I think it's a 40% cooldown reduction there. So yeah, that's Blade's identity. Difficulty, I think this build actually, once it's geared, I think this is one of the easiest melee builds to play. And just because it's easy doesn't mean it's boring. In fact, I think it's one of the most fun builds in the entire game. Really high APM, really fluid, really fast, and she's surprisingly tanky. She's got a decently high armor and HP coefficient, and I would say this is a decently high APM too. Yeah, really fun. The other build, Burst, gonna be a popular build, 100%. Pump this baby. And so this is Deathblade. I think this is gonna I think Burst actually. You may find this surprising. Burst might actually be the go-to build in T1, T2 because you don't have that much spec early on, and you don't have many runes. Let's just assume we fill this up, okay? Fill up the gauge. Bang. Okay. So this playstyle is pretty chill actually. So you pop your gauge and you build up stacks. Now you can see my stack progress in 2 places. So notice on the right of my character you see this gauge filling up. And you see in the bottom left you see the 15 stacks. Basically what the stacks do is increases my attack power and increases the damage of my Z skill when I pop that. You see that big finishing move? Increase the damage of that. And increases my attack power, and it stacks up and up and up. And did you see when I popped my finishing skill, it fill up my bubbles up instantly? So what those stacks do are, for every stack, I get 5% of my gauge back. So at 20 stacks, you get 100% of your gauge back. And I actually think this is the go-to build. It doesn't need that much stats. You just need a lot of multi-hits, and it flows really nicely. Big damage. And you're back again. See how that see that flow? Bang, bang, bang. Feels really good. I'm probably going to play this. And sometimes you won't get 20 seconds in a full rotation. That's probably just my build being bad, but yeah, that's just a demonstration. So that's Deathblade. Found it really fun. Really love her theme. The big blades. There's Macy. Guys, this is Gunlancer. Gunlancers are not tanks, okay? Let's start off with that. They're not tanks, they're not supports, they're full-blown DPS damage dealers. Check out this damage. Bang, bang, bang. Top picky. Yeah. See that? So their identity is this big ass chunky shield that you can toggle on and off. And when you do have it toggled, it gives you stagger immunity and pushback immunity. So it means your attacks can't get interrupted. Very useful when, of course, when you just want to tank damage, or if you want to be immune to your rotation being interrupted. So every time you see Red Warlord pop his combo, he probably has his shield up. The other identity, Achino, is this X skill. This X skill is this massive shield dome. You can target it anywhere. Anyone inside of this dome, so long as you have gauge, is immune to damage. They do not take damage. So we'll come back to that. His first awakening is this big ass shield. When you pump it, you max out your gauge. Very useful. When you're inside the AoE, you get 50% damage reduction and you get level 3 super armor. You can't get stunned, you can't get CC'd, you can't get knocked out, pushback, all that kind of stuff. His synergy, his buffs. He's got a taunt. So he's not a tank, but he's got a taunt. Very useful for interrupting bosses, stopping them through their patterns, their mechanics, whatever you want to call it. Synergies are like group buffs or debuffs that you can help your party. In this case, it's an armor destruction debuff. 12% armor destruction. It essentially increases your damage to the boss for everyone in your party. Very tanky, highest HP and armor coefficient in the game. His movement is a little lackluster. You can make up for this by speccing into more agility or swiftness. Other than that, he's got a very controversial spacebar. You do have to get used to this, so if you want to jump forwards, you have to slide your mouse back behind your character to jump forward. That's going to be a pain for a lot of people to learn, but once you do get used to it, trust me, you get used to it, it's not that bad. It does look painful, but you get used to it. It's like second nature eventually. But you got two different builds. This is a burst build, and the other build, known as Blue Warlord, is a sustained build. And we call it Red Warlord, Blue Warlord because of the color of the skills in your skill set here. People often always ask, Blue Warlord, Red Warlord. Blue Warlord is easier, it's far more tankier. If you want a bursty playstyle, big bursty damage, cool effects, actually use your cannon as a weapon, then you go Gigached Red Gunlancer. As for fun, I love this class. The most fun builds in this game to me personally. And it's got a lower APM. If you want higher APM, I recommend play the blue build. Yeah, that's about it, yeah. This is Artillerist, one of the 3 gunner classes. He plays like a black mage, I would call him. That's how I describe him. He plays like a black mage, and instead of a staff, he has a big gun. A very big gun. And for his identity, he has this gauge that charges up, that gets crit chance, that gives him crit chance with his identity, and he gets this damage buff. So he's like always heating up. Whenever you use skills, you get this gauge that heats up. Do more damage. And with your engraving here, I'm not sure what it's called in NA, but it gives you crit chance, gives you damage reduction. Really nice engraving. It actually counteracts the negative effect of Grudge. The 20% damage taken effect from Grudge cancels that. He now takes 20% less damage from that engraving. And for his... When you press Z, you go into a turret, you're completely stationary, so you're pretty vulnerable, but you do have this nice shield on your R skill here. And when you're in human form, most people use a build similar to this, and you get this nice chunky shield. Nice chunky shield. He doesn't have the most mobility. He does this... His spacebar is decent, but most of his tankiness comes from his personal shields. That shield you saw on the turret, and the shield that I just used now. As for his synergy, that little rocket that I just shot at him, it's similar to Warlords. I mean, it's the same as Warlords. It's a 12% armor destruction debuff on the boss, so effectively the boss takes more damage. And yeah, pretty sure. You run around like this, you drop your turrets, it does damage by themselves. This is like a summoner. This is like a mage, but with guns. A techno mage. Really cool thing if you like big guns, if you like high tech, if you like nukes, if you're American. Oh, here's his other debuff. So on his S skill, the boss now takes 20% extra stagger damage. So it's great to bring to parties that are low in stagger. You can now increase how much stagger a boss takes. Yeah. And that's Gunner. Really fun because he's chill. I think he's really chill. You can sort of skirt around the edges of an encounter like this. And like I said, he's like a mage with guns. And I think he's quite chill to play. I think he's easy to pick up. Where the difficulty lies in is the delay on his missiles, on his missile bombs. So if I drop my nuke here, look how long it takes to land. It takes like, what, 2 seconds? 2-3 seconds? And you can just imagine if the boss moves in that time, rip all of your damage. Same as this skill here. This is, I think it's called airstrike. Bang. Takes a while, right? So it's going to take a while to really master this class because effectively you have to learn every fight in and out. You have to learn how a boss moves, when a boss is going to do a certain mechanic and stuff like that. APM on the lower side. And yeah, I just think he's really fun. I really love the theme. Look at this massive gun. How can you not like this? And he has one of the coolest glows in the game. So yeah, I love Artillerist. And there's an alternative build that you can use where you can go into your turret and you can stack most of your damage into your turret. And that's actually sort of meta right now on KR and RU. But the other build still meta as well. The build that I was just playing. I'm just running around dropping nukes and missiles and stuff like that. So yeah, it's personal preference. Bada bing, bada boom. That's Gunner. Artillerist. This is Gunslinger. One of the Deadhunter? Deadeye. She's the general unlock for Deadeye. Her synergy, her buff is a 10% crit chance buff. And she's got a really nice high APM playstyle. She's got her 3 weapon swaps. Really nice, fun flowy gameplay. You can tell I'm kind of biased towards this class. She's not my favorite, but easily in my top 3 favorite classes. She can be ranged, she can be melee. Has a really nice flow to her. She is on the, I would say, yeah, I would say she's quite difficult, actually. She's quite difficult. Not because she's got a lot of buttons and the weapon swap mechanic. No, that's not the hard part. The hard part is that she's very squishy. She's got the lowest HP armor coefficient in the game, I think. But she has a lot of animation lock. Check this out. I can't move when I'm doing this. I can cancel this. But when I'm stuck in these, I have to always be asking, am I safe when I use this skill? Am I going to get hit? Is the boss going to move? Especially these shotgun skills. Really long animations. Always have to be asking, am I going to be safe when I use this skill? Or is the boss going to move? Am I going to rip my damage? So she's difficult in that sense. Really squishy. So you have to be on point. But she does have a lot of movement. Which is what sort of makes it, sort of takes off the edge. Bang, bang, combo spacebar, S. You can consider her R skill is also a mimic skill, because it gives stagger immunity. Somersault, a lot of movement. Let's just reach out. I'll show you that again. Lots of movement, but very squishy. And lots of animation lock. So bang, 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 combo spacebar, this one. A lot of movement. So yeah, really fun class to play in my opinion. The risk reward is definitely there. Just know that she's been consistently nerfed, but still strong. I don't think they'll touch her too much more. I think she's where she needs to be, probably. Anyway, great class, love her theme, love the guns, love the aesthetic. Honestly, she's playable up to 200 MS if you ask me. 200, 250 maybe. 250 is like the upper limit, but 250 is definitely safe. But just know that it's a weapon, it's a wheel swap mechanic. It's like cycling through a telephone dial, you know those really old ones? Those boomer ones? It's like one of those. Like I can't select pistol with 1, sniper with 2, shotgun with 3. No, you have to cycle through them. So that might be a little bit weird. Really cool class. Let's Gunslinger. Berserker, guys. Berserker, iconic class. One of the 3 warrior classes. Bang. I'm playing the Madness build currently, also known as Mayhem. And this is permanent Berserker mode. Pretty tanky. I'd say he's one of the more forgiving classes to play. Relatively easy, especially if you play Mayhem. Permanent Berserker mode. You have this constant attack speed, movement speed buff. I think it's like 15% or something. When you combine movement, his high HP armor coefficient, his tankiness, he's a pretty easy, forgiving class to play, if you ask me. He does have a fair bit of animation lock, to be honest. Like, these aren't the fastest skills, but they aren't the slowest, so probably the most challenging skills to get off for him are his Q and S skills. And these are like the meta skills that you use for Mayhem Berserker. See how long you're stuck in place here. So when you're playing Lost Ark, always be asking yourself, am I safe to do a skill? Based on how much animation lock a skill has. Is the boss about to move? Am I going to miss my skill? Am I about to get hit if I use this skill? So you always be asking yourself those questions, and that's what makes Lost Ark engaging. To me anyway. Because animation lock is a thing, it's a big part of Lost Ark. It's something you always got to think about. Especially on like more squishy classes like Gunslinger and stuff. Now his identity is essentially Berserker mode. But if I take it off, so Berserker, without that engraving, you have to build up gauge manually. So just imagine that this gauge was empty, right? And if you play the other engraving, oftentimes you're in human mode and it feels a lot less slow because you don't have the attack speed and movement speed buff. But yeah, it feels really good going into Berserker mode. Like I said, more on the forgiving side to play. Pretty tanky, decently high APM. Long cooldowns though, long cooldowns. But in the meantime, his auto attack damage is really strong. His auto attack damage is super strong. So this is like one of the few classes where it's actually kind of legit to auto attack a lot because his auto attacks does do a decent amount of damage. It's not trivial. Whereas most classes, it's pretty much pointless to auto attack that much. But Berserker's not one of those classes. So yeah, that's Berserker. If you love guts, if you love the big soul, then play Berserker. This is Striker. This is Striker, one of the only male martial artist class. He's the carbon copy of Wardancer, male version of Wardancer. Plays very nicely. Striker's a big one. People always like, does Striker suck? No, he doesn't, boys. Striker does not suck. He's just misunderstood. misunderstood. Now this is the esoteric flurry build, I think it's called. It's the one that actually uses your, what do you call them? These orbs, finish orbs. Now Striker sometimes does use auto attack cancels, but it's not that big of a deal. The general rotation is like you have this combo, you want to synergize with this big crit buff here. This is an 18% crit buff. You can make him mobile if you want to. You can make him easier to play. This is the easier to play build, and I think it's the more fun build. There's a lot of controversy surrounding Striker because the meta build, the other build, Deathblade, is really hard to play. It uses a lot of spec and crit, sacrificing it for movement. And on his primary damage skills, you can get interrupted easily. If a boss moves, rip all your damage in that single combo. But I think this is the recommended build to play to start with. Pretty mobile, low animation lock, and you should be able to move around pretty easily. Yeah, the thing's very cool, of course. You can roleplay as Ryu. Very cool. Difficulty, I'd say this build here is pretty easy to play. Now, Deathblade is a very difficult build. Deathblade requires a lot of gear. It needs really good cooldown gems, so later on you get these gems that reduce the cooldown of all your skills. You need good buffs from supports. Supports have this artifact set buff at 1445 item level where you get movement speed, attack speed, and that really helps to help with Deathblade. Deathblade is like a very hard build to play, I think, effectively. But it does come into its own at higher item levels. But in the meantime, I do suggest play this build. This is the esoteric flurry build. Yeah, this is a relatively high APM build. I like it a lot. I like it a lot. Feels good. I like it. Recommend this as a starter build. And as Striker. I think Striker's pretty decent actually. They're not that bad. Don't worry, if you want to play Striker, I recommend play this build for a while, and then when we get to higher item levels, try out Deathblade. Deathblade is admittedly more effective, but this build might get buffed. So hold out for hope, Striker meant. So you can. High anime per minute. This is Bard. This is one of the 3 mage classes. She's a support class. She provides shield, heals, damage buffs, damage reduction buffs, and essentially her gameplay loop, build gauge, to fill up these bubbles. When you hit 3 bubbles, just max it out. When you hit 3 bubbles, you hit your Z skill. Your Z skill is one of your identities. It gives the party a 15% damage buff for 15 seconds. So for every bar that you have filled up, it gives you 5% more damage. So 1 bar is 5%, 2 bars is 10%, 3 bars is 15%. But you typically never use the damage buff below 3. But the interesting thing about Bard is that she has to pick whether she gives her heal or whether she uses her damage buff. So there's a bit of engagement there, a bit of decision making. Pretty interesting. What else to say about that? So her synergy is this 10% damage debuff. It's applied through either this little automated pet thing or these laser balls. It gives a 10% damage buff for her party, and that stacks with this buff here. This is a 6% attack power buff combined with 15% of her attack power. Alternatively, she has this attack power buff. If people stand within this, they get the same attack power buff, but they have to be standing inside of it. And all those 3 things stack. So really, during burst phases, she pops her identity, she pops her synergy, and her damage buff. So all those 3 things stack. The 10% damage debuff, the 15% damage buff, and the 6% attack power buff. So she can provide a lot of damage for her party when she needs it. She is easy to get into, but definitely hard to master. But bards typically get a healthy amount of agility, so they're pretty mobile, really nice spacebar, and they also typically get something called heavy armor. This is heavy armor, reduces your damage taken, increases your defense, and so they're actually pretty tanky with heavy armor level 3, and pretty mobile. So when you combine mobility and tankiness, that makes it pretty forgiving to play. The hard part is the decision making. Do you give your party a heal, or do you give them a damage buff? So you're always going to be thinking. That's what makes Bard pretty interesting, in my opinion. And also she's got she's got a bigger burst heal than Holy Knight does, or Paladin, I should say Paladin. She's got a bigger burst heal than Paladin. Bards are typically taken for parties that are learning a fight for the first time, or progression. Decently high APM, actually. Yeah, I find it pretty fun. I was surprised how much I actually enjoyed her. Really fun to play. And of course, always desired, Bards are rock stars. You sign up to a party, instant invited all the time, every time. If you're geared, of course. Oh, actually, also, bards can have a lot of clutch play. There's another interesting dynamic to her. Paladins have this as well. It's called Rhapsody. This is massive. This is a massive skill right here. So this skill right here, it's called Rhapsody. And anyone standing inside of that takes I think it's like a 75% damage reduction, I'll clarify that later. But yeah, it's a massive damage reduction, very clutch play. You see it a lot in PvP, but it can be done in PvE as well. And especially in high level raids when mechanics can like potentially one-shot the squishier classes like Gunslinger, Rhapsody is used extensively by very good bards. So yeah, something to consider. Really interesting gameplay actually. Good bards can be incredibly clutch. This is Paladin. There's Gia. Look at my pet. You guys like my pet? Look at he's cute. This is one of the 4 warrior classes. He's a support. Okay. No DPS paladins, please. If you don't want to have a negative experience of getting constantly denied by every single party. Unless you're playing with friends, then you can play DPS paladin. If you're super overgeared, then yeah, you can play DPS Pally as an offset. Paladin is a support. He's got the same synergy as Bard. Same debuff, same buff. It's a 10% damage buff to his party as long as you apply it to the boss. He also has a Rhapsody, that clutch skill, 70% damage reduction as well as a shield. He has a shield that he can apply to party mates. It's a smaller shield, but when it expires, it heals them for 8% of their HP. He's got damage buffs on his Q. It's a 6% damage buff, 6% attack power buff. On his R skill, he's also got a 6% attack power buff. It also gives mana regen. Yeah, so constant shields. How he heals is through that F shield, but also through his identity. So when you get this engraving, there's a class engraving that you can get that heals anyone within his peak aura consistently. So it's like a constant heal, and they also get a 10% damage buff. So you can stack all 3 buffs. You can stack the 10% damage buff, the 6% attack power buff, and the 10% damage buff from his P aura. So you stagger your damage buffs, you keep up your debuff, you apply shields, you chuck out the clutch damage reduction skill with shields, another damage reduction skill if they need it. As long as they're standing inside it, it's a damage reduction. And yeah, pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Not as interesting to me as Bard, because there's less decision making. It's pretty straightforward. You build up gauge, use your identity, pop your awakening for big shields, big gauge, stagger your damage buffs, keep up your debuff on the boss. Pretty straightforward. So I'd say he's quite easy to play. Really good class if you're new to the game, learning supports. Just because he's easy doesn't mean he's bad. Exceptional, always taken. Same as Bards, instant invite to every party. Really tanky, pretty mobile because a lot of Paladins go agility, a fair amount of agility. And like I've always said, mobility plus high HP armor coefficients equals chill gameplay. And that's Paladino. This is Shadowhunter, one of the 3 assassin classes. She uses glaives for weapons. One of the meta builds used for Shadowhunters is her transformation mode, demonic transformation. So the general gameplay loop is to build gauge like this with your purple skills. And then you transform. Super cool. I really love the theme of this class. So general gameplay loop is to build gauge, go into demon mode, and then use all these fancy red skills. And you know what the nice part about these skills? These skills have no requirement for back attacks or head attacks, which makes them very easy to play, very forgiving to play. Other thing to note is that when you're in this demon mode, you have a lot of stagger damage. Stagger is like knockdown damage. So incredibly strong stagger. Her synergy is a 12% damage buff that lasts for 6 seconds, long cooldown, but you can't apply it when you're in demon form. So this buff is actually applied pretty rarely, honestly. She does have an alternate build where you can stay in human form and apply this buff more often, but still it's on a pretty long cooldown. When you're in cockroach form, when you're in demon mode, you get a 20% movement speed buff, I think it is. And when you use the engraving, you get crit chance. When you use this engraving, you get crit chance. You have pushback immunity. You have stagger immunity. You can't get interrupted on your skills. So that's really strong. You can get knocked up though. You can get knocked up. So it's only got level 1 super armor. So that's called super armor. She has level 1 super armor when she's in demon mode. She's pretty fun, but me personally, I find her quite repetitive. This whole gameplay loop of just building gauge, going back to the demon mode. It's fun, don't get me wrong, but a bit repetitive. But yeah, that's demonic. This is Scrapper, one of the 4 martial artists, or I guess there's 5 now. One of the 4 female martial artists. Her identity is like this. She has this gauge, this yellow gauge. So whenever you ever use yellow skills, it uses the yellow gauge. Let me just use some green skills a little bit. And whenever you use yellow skills, it charges up the green gauge. So I have a build where my yellow gauge regeneration is increased. It's a really high, this build in particular is really high APM. And max out agility, or it's like 50-50 agility and crit. High APM build. Let's just go through it. So she's got a 6% constant damage debuff to the boss. So there, 6% damage buff for her party. And yeah, it's pretty fun. I don't know. If you like spammy high APM classes, this one might be a pick for you. I like it personally. Really good movement. Combo spacebar, double dash spacebar. The Q's a nice movement skill, really low cooldown. Gives you attack power buff as well when it lands. And she's got this leap as well. So the leap, the Q, the double spacebar, a lot of movement. Especially if you go Taijutsu. This is Taijutsu with the agility build. A lot of cool attack speed and movement speed and cooldown reduction. Feels fun. I like it. Solid class. Respectable class. I see a good infighter. Yeah, I take him. Come along, infighter. What else can I say about it? Relatively easy because she's got good mobility. Like I always say, good mobility plus high HP armor coefficient equals relatively easy in my opinion. It always comes down to mobility and tankiness. If you're really smart with your movement, you just won't take damage for a hit. Ever. That's not true. There's a lot of random damage that you just can't avoid, but looking at you, Argos. Solid class. One of the best counter skills in the game. That's probably the most interesting thing about her. This counter skill, she's got 2 counter skills. This R skill though is nutty. It refreshes on cooldown when it hits sometimes, but really long range, really fast animation. One of the best counter skills. Probably the better than Gunlancer's counter skill. Bang! And that's Scrapper. This is Deadeye. He's got a weapon swap mechanic. He's got 3 weapons. He's one of the gunner classes. Formerly known as Devilhunter. He's got a pistol stance, he's got a shotgun stance, and he's got a sniper rifle stance. Most of his damage with the enhanced weapon build, most of his damage comes from the shotgun stance. When you play enhanced weapon, every time you swap your weapons, you get a critical strike chance buff, 20% crit chance at level 1 of this engraving. And it's a pretty high APM build, a lot of mobility. So I love him for that, and I love the gun theme, so this is definitely one of my favorite classes to play. He's on the squishier side. I think he has the lowest HP armor coefficient in the game. And his playstyle is quite difficult simply because of how his skill tripods work. So on his shotgun, he has this tripod to min-max your damage as a Deadeye. You don't need to take this, but most Deadeyes do. He's actually range dependent. So to min-max your damage next to a boss, you need to be right up there. So you have to be within a certain melee range to do max damage. So check out the numbers here. Big numbers here, but if I get to the edge of the hitbox like this, look at those crits. Look how anemic those crits are. Just kidding, they're a bit bigger now, but sometimes it is quite low. The second shot does a lot more damage, but if I get a lot closer, you'll see how much bigger it is. Yeah, you have to get into melee range. You have to get back attacks because the meta build for Deadeyes is to get back attacks. But he might be getting a buff this year. Despite that, I really enjoy this playstyle. He's actually got really good impairment on his shotgun stance. A lot of impairment here, so very important, strong, oh, I should say stagger. When I say impairment, I mean stagger. And decent amount of destruction. Now the sniper stance isn't really used that much. It's decent damage, but nothing to write home about. So typically, Deadeyes actually don't even spec too many points into their sniper rifle anymore. They actually max out their 2 pistol skills that actually do damage. Cruel Chaser, something shot, quick shot, Cruel Chaser, and then they max out the shotty. Really fun, high APM. More on the difficult side because you need to get back attacks, you need to get close range, get up close. So one of the harder ones. And I'm looking forward to a buff, Copium. Maybe next month. Now there's an alternate playstyle you can play. If you don't like the weapon swapping, you can use Pistolier. As you can see, it completely locks out shotgun and pistol, but it buffs the damage of your handgun skills significantly. It also buffs the stagger damage. So that knockdown damage, that impairment damage, significantly. So you're not useless. It's actually a legitimate build. So if you really want to play Handgunner, or Pistolier as it's called, I recommend you check out Handgunner TV. Great guy. And that's Deadeye. So this is Wardancer. Wardancer, one of the martial artists, and she's highly coveted in parties, particularly for her synergy. So these 2 skills combined. her A and R, That's a 18% crit chance buff for her party, and she gives a movement speed and attack speed buff as well. And so when she gets really geared, it's on like a really low cooldown as well. So people love bringing Battle Masters or Wardancers along for that constant buff. And they do a lot of auto attack cancels. To show you how to auto attack cancel, you hold left click or your movement skill, your movement button, and you tap C like this. And that's the auto attack cancel. And Wardancers do a lot of this. And this is actually really strong in PvP, or there are particular boss fights where you have to break people free when they get imprisoned, and multi-hits with auto attacks will break them out faster. So it's something to know for later. When people get imprisoned, you can do these auto attack cancels, or any skills with like multiple multi-hits. So yeah, so I'd say she's like on the easier side to play, especially when they get really, really good. With a lot of agility, you get a lot of cooldown reduction, a lot of mobility, and HP and armor coefficient is on the higher side actually, which was kind of surprising to me. She's quite tanky, good mobility, so tankiness and mobility provides for like an easier gameplay loop. And she's actually one of the top performing DPSs right now at very high endgame, which was really good to play. What else can I say about her? I find her fun. She's pretty fun, but I prefer my striker ever so slightly more. I like his gameplay loop a little better. I think because I get to use 4 finishing moves on him. In this build in particular, I'm only using 2. And I think that's because the regular skills do more than her identity skills. What do you call these? Ultimate skills. I think they're called ultimate skills or something. Yeah, what else can I say about her? What are my notes? Difficulty, I'd say relatively easy. Easy to mid average. High APM, especially when you have super agility. Feels good. There's an alternate build that actually doesn't use any of these finishing moves, so you don't use any of these orbs, and it's a lot of auto attacking as well. Constantly pumping that skills. Yeah, I don't know. Cool class. One of the more desired ones for the synergy. And that's Wardancer. This is Hawkeye. Not Hawkeye, that's the old name. This is Sharpshooter. His synergy, his buff, his group buff is a 6% constant damage buff to the entire party, as long as it to the enemy that's applied to. He's kind of a pseudo ranged with his abilities. He can go ranged, but to be honest, most of the time you're spending your time either melee or mid range, and that kind of goes for most classes. But yeah, he's on the squishier side, but he's got decent movement. His identity involves building up gauge. So you summon this little hawk here, this eagle. I'm going the second ally build, which is the off-meta build, an agi crit build. When you have your bird out, you give your party an 8% movement speed skill movement speed buff, and you get an extra amount of damage. In this case, it's only 4% damage to myself, for myself only, 4% damage buff. But if you get to level 3, it turns into a 14% damage buff. So it's just a nice little bonus. You get that movement speed, the damage bonus. Yeah. Me personally, I don't enjoy Hawkeye that. I mean, I enjoy it, but I don't really like it a lot. Something about the gameplay loop is missing for me. But it's cool. Decent APM, especially if you play the agi builds. And they're not bad by any means. Really strong class, especially since they got some nice buffs last year. A very effective class, especially in the right hands. His identity might be getting changed up soon. We don't know about that, but yeah, that's Hawkeye. So this is Hawk, one of the 3 mage classes. Sorceress. Really fun to play. One of my favorite classes thematically, gameplay wise. Really chill. She plays similar to Artillerist, if you were here before for Artillerist. This is Reflux. I'm playing Reflux. So Reflux in particular has really good movement because you don't use your gauge for mana release at all. You use it for blink. Blink has got great mobility. You have super armor when you blink. And you can just teleport across the battlefield like a living goddess. What's her synergy? Her group buff is a 6% damage buff for her party. Very high uptime, pretty much always up. And she has multiple skills to apply that. These top 3 here. She's got really strong stagger damage. Stagger is like knockdown damage. And pretty good destruction. Actually, a really stacked class for destruction and stagger. Especially when you go Ignition. When you go Ignition Achino, It does a couple of things. So her Z identity is called like mana release, and what it does is a couple of things. It increases the base damage of her skills, and it also scales off of how much spec she has. So her damage is increased by how much of spec she has. It reduces the cast time of skills significantly, which can be further reduced by more agility, or also engravings like this one. This is a engraving which reduces the casting time of skills by 20%. Casting skills. So when I pump this Z skill, super fast casting time, crazy burst. And the other thing that it does, it increases the destruction level of your fire skills by 1 level and the stagger level of your lightning skills by 1 level. My 2 fire skills here both have 2 points of destruction, or weak point we call it, and when you use your Z skill it increases up to level 3. So it's 3 points of destruction each, and your stagger of your lightning skill goes up by 1 level. So really, really interesting identity, but T1 is probably going to be the build to play. A lot easier to build, a lot more forgiving, more movement, and I think she's actually I think casting Reflux Sork is actually relatively easy to play. You got a lot of movement, you're ranged. Low key, this game's kind of biased towards range classes, so yeah, that's Sork. Really cool class. Great skill effects, great sound effects, and this class is going to be popular for a reason. Even though a lot of people are playing this class, don't shy away from picking her as your main. Don't worry about it. If you want to play Sork, please play Sork. She's an incredible class, honestly. So that's Sork. This is Soulfist. She's one of the 5 martial artists. Her identity is basically Super Saiyan, Kaioken, and there's 3 stages to them. So the first stage, you get cooldown reduction, attack speed, and just straight up damage. I think this one says 10% attack speed, 10% cooldown, and 25% damage, and it's stage 3 hype. Big damage. So when you go to stage 3 hype, that's when you pump all your damage. I'm playing the off-meta build, the high APM build. There's a bit of a stigma against Soulfists, especially when they play the meta build, because it's really easy to miss your Spirit Bomb. Spirit Bomb is her first awakening skill. Really easy to miss. I'll show you why. Takes a really long time to charge her ulti. Bang, 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 bang. Check this out. Now, can you imagine in this time, do you think the boss is really going to stand still like that? That's why there's a bit of a stigma against... Oh, not stigma. They get kind of memed on, really. If you see a geared Soulfist in the party finder, you'll take him. I mean, you trust him, right? You trust him, they're going to land the skill. Stigma was the wrong word. I mean to say, yeah, they just laughed at, you know? They get giggled at, they made fun of, but they're a good class. Anyway, this is the high APM build. That's her identity, yeah? So let's talk about her synergy. So her synergy is this crack skill right here. I want to talk about this skill in particular. This is one of the most attribute heavy skills in the game. Look how many modifiers it has. See all that yellow text? It's got 2 points of destruction, level 3 stagger. It's a head attack skill. It's a counter skill. It has super armor, level 1 super armor, and it's a counter skill. What does it do? Anyway, when you land that skill, it gives you a 60% damage buff for your entire party. So it's similar to Scrapper and Hawkeye and Sork. They all have the same synergy, but it's all stackable. So if you had a Scrapper and a Sork Sharpshooter all in the same party, their buff would stack because they're different classes. So 6% damage. This one is just a damage reduction buff, but you can make it to cleanse. You can make it such that it cleanses people. Only a few classes have cleanse skills. Soulfist is one of them. Anyway, let me just show the rotation, yeah? So you go bang, bang, bang. Really fun class to play. Because when you're in stage 3 hype, you have a lot of cooldown reduction. You have 60% extra damage. You get this attack speed bonus. And you get to do this. Kamehameha. Really fun. I would say this build in particular is easy to play. The other build is a little more difficult to play, I think. And I think it doesn't really come into its own until you get a lot of spec. See how I just pumped in 1800 stat points? Yo, you're not getting this for a while, okay? The more spec you have, the faster your gauge recharges when you're not in hype. But yeah, you do 90 damage when you max out your spec. It's really cool. But I think early on, you might want to play the other build. The infinite energy build. I'm not sure. But check this out. Wow. Recharges super fast. But the reason why... let me show you real quick. When you get your energy below 1, you can't do any skills. You can't cast any skills. You have to wait for it to completely regen to do skills again. Oh yeah, I would show you why it's not really T1 friendly, I guess. Let's simulate a T1 build. And suddenly the recharge takes far longer. Okay, so when you don't have much spec, look how long this takes, dude. Holy shit. Taking a million years. A million years. Can you imagine this? This would feel so underwhelming early on. Look at this, you're doing nothing. No one likes doing nothing. Okay. But you gotta be smart with your skills anyway. You gotta make sure you don't go below 1 energy, I guess. That is Soulfist.